Beep beep, what is up ninjas? My name is Semworld and today I'm going to be teaching you guys the sound designer way of getting your leads to sound like this, big. Yeah, insert your sexual jokes now. So a lot of us use digital synthesizers to make our leads for EDM. The good thing about this is that it makes our life a lot easier because we don't actually need to utilize the HAAS effect or the EQ mid-side technique to get something to sound wider. They are going to add to the wideness of the sound, but everything you need is right there in your synthesizer, and today I'm going to teach you guys how to control it so you can tame that power and make your leads from this little to this big, this wide, if you know what I'm saying, guys. So now the reason we can do this is because we have digital synthesizers that can produce up to 16 voices in some of them. Back in the day we had synths like the Korg MS-20, the Moog Sub 37, or the Moogs, let's just say, this is more newer, the ARP Odyssey, that, you know, produced only one mono sound, which means one input would go into the amp and you would record it and it would be one. And in order to get that to sound wide, you would have to pan hard left and hard right and offset it, add a chorus, stuff like that to achieve a wideness. The good thing is we're now in 2018 and we don't need to do much of that if we're not using those type of synthesizers. So let's go into Ableton, where I'm going to show you guys some cool stuff to get your favorite presets you have laying around to sound wide or mono. Alright fam, so we are here inside of Serum. Now we're going to load up a quick little preset. Let's do a bass first to start things off. This is going to be a HAAS one. So let's go with Drop It Down maybe. Now when you hear that sound, the first question we need to ask ourselves if it's in mono or in stereo. Now obviously it has a little bit of a stereo vibe and it's probably going to be due to this hyper here. So let's get rid of it. Now let's apply a mono. So this sound is fully in mono now, and you can check it with a utility. So from here, let's say that I decide to make this sound be a little bit stereo. In the sound designer's way, there's a couple of ways to do this. The first way is to have more than one voice, because remember, in order to have stereo, we need to have two voices, one for the left and one for the right. So let's get rid of this oscillator for now, and I can add another voice here. Instantly you hear it gets wide, but at the same time you hear this detunement that we don't really want. We just want the original sound wide. So I'm going to lower the detunement down. Notice how when I lower it down, however, we still hear something on the right side of the signal. That's due to an effect here, which, you know, let's get rid of these for now. So right now it's fully mono. Now if the arm phase comes up on this preset, now we have a fully stereo square bass. Now if I add another oscillator that is in mono, I have my stereo sound now, but now I have a mono signal. Let's try adding three voices. You can see that we've made the sound instantly stereo just like that. Very simply, we want more than a voice in order to get that stereo. So let's say that this bass, you know, let's pick another one here. You know, here we have this nice little bass that, you know, very nice for like the new HAAS stuff, very electronic, electro house. Now let's say that I want this to be wide. Well, first off, we already know arm phase needs to be up. We cannot have the arm phase down because the arm phase is going to restart the phase of the wavetable as it goes through its little, you know, little roller coaster of a life. This one has a lot of dips though. So now when I put the arm phase up, it's fully in stereo. Now if we get rid of oscillator B, we lose that mono signal. So there we have the full stereo bass. Now if I want this to be in mono, remember, arm face down. We still have a little bit of stereo as you can see, but it's not as bad as if we have it all the way up. Very simple there as you can see. But usually what I do, and this is a tip for you guys, is to, if you're going to make a stereo sound, a stereo bass, and you want to not kill two birds with one stone, might as well make oscillator be your mono signal to have a good bass that has presence in the mono signal and in the stereo. In my opinion, the mono signal is more important than the stereo because that's where usually, you know, you're going to have a lot of that driving force in a track. So just keep that stuff in mind. So that's going to be on how to do it with a bass. Very simple, as you can see. There are other alternatives, however. For instance, let's say that we have both of these in mono. How do I make that stereo? Let's assume that, well, we can use techniques like, for instance, we can use a hyper to add more voices, detune, and that's going to make a more of a wider style bass. You're going to add a certain sound to it, but that's going to be the deal there. Now you can also use the dimension expander, which utilizes a version of the HAAS effect. Now this technique is simple. We have a sound that hits the left and the right at the same time, but then we get it out of phase. What that means is that the left and the right signal are not aligned properly. They're not playing at the same time, so that's what's going to trick the ear into giving you that wideness. You're getting the sound out of phase for this. Now, if we go into one of the big room pack leads like Main Stage Revolution, we can get, like, let's say a mono me lead here, which is, you know, going to be a lead that would be layered in the mono signal. It's very important that you have a mono layer for your lead and also a stereo layer, which we're going to talk about right now in a bit. So this sound is mono for sure. Now, in order to make it stereo, again, you've been following the video, we add more than one voice. We get a bit of detunement. Let's lower that down. But we still have it in stereo, and it's just a simple fix. We don't need to be like, man, how the hell am I going to get this sound to get into stereo? If you already know the theory behind this, because you have two voices now. Now, let's say you want this sound to have a mono signal and a stereo signal at the same time. Well, you're going to go with 3 or 5 voices. Odd numbers tend to work better for this, and they're going to give you a little bit of that wideness, but at the same time, they're going to maintain a sound in the center of the mix. As you can see here, when you do tuning, you can see the middle one stays the same throughout the whole thing. That's going to be only with odd number type of voices there. And then the rest of the sounds get changed, aka the pitch goes up, you know, -10, +10 on both sides. But the sound's going to get wider. If I lower the blend, we hear the mono sound, now the stereo sound. So with this, you can control that. Have a little bit of stereo and a little bit of mono with the blend. Simple techniques there, as you guys can see, but it makes the biggest difference. Now, if we move over to, let's say, one of the super saws here, this is when it starts to get a little bit interesting. Because let's say that we want this to sound mono, which I don't recommend because it would actually sound really bad. Then, honestly, RN phase all the way down. Let's get rid of a little bit of... We still have a little bit on the sides, as you can hear, that release is giving us. So let's lower the blend on this, and let's put this at 7 here. So we get that there. And as you can see, it doesn't sound that pleasing, so you really have to be careful with this one. Usually, stereo leads are going to be a little bit more open, like the super saws tend to be more stereo than mono. But that's the way they are. But let's say that we do want to make stuff wide now that we know all this stuff. What are other techniques we can implement after the lead? You know, we've created a lead to kind of get it to sound wider. Now, let's say we have a lead like this one where we have a little bit of the stereo signal and a little bit of the mono. Let's make it a little bit less, you know, there. Now we know the tricks. How do we get this to sound wider? Easily, we can use an EQ8, mid-side EQ, and the technique is easy. One, you can just boost the lows, on the mids, on the mono. You can boost down on the highs, and then you can boost the side signal more for it to sound wider to the ear, because we have mono and stereo information. Now, if we only had a mono signal on this, aka it was fully mono, like we just knit this technique does not work, because there's nothing in the stereo signal to really boost. So a lot of people, they go on and say, yo, to get your leads wide, you have to do this. But if there is no stereo signal, remember, then you're not going to be able to achieve that effect. Okay, so keep that in mind. But with other sounds, you can do this technique. Now, what if I want to get this to sound wide? What can I do? Well, you're going to duplicate it. Now you have 2 voices, hard right and hard left. And notice how it already sounds wide. Now, the reason for this is just because both of these serums are producing a saw, but they're not exactly the same because it's not coming from the same synth itself. So we get that wideness there, hard pan and hard left. However, if I were to record this guy and do that, it would not work. So keep that in mind. Now, the last widening technique that I want to show in this video before we end it, and hopefully you've learned a lot of valuable information that you probably knew already, but just adding more to it, so now you're a fucking expert at this, is going to be literally... how do I get, let's say, a clap or a sound that has been recorded to sound wide? So let's go into the Psytrance pack that I've been working on. It's coming out in January, by the way. So this sound right here sounds very... So how do I make this wide? Well, the first technique that we can use is, again, panning hard left and hard right, but that won't work because the sound is exactly the same. So in order to change this, what I can do is detune this a little bit. So let's go in here. Let's put warp on. Let's do that. And the sound has to enough to where it starts to sound wide. The other way is going to be using the HAAS effect, which we have here. Now, generally, the HAAS effect will revolve around having one be at 1 millisecond, and then the other value would be between 20 to 40. That's when the HAAS effect really starts to pick up. But as you can see, this one doesn't really work that well, so I'm going to have to add a bit of delay here as well. And then we start to hear it there. Now, if I were to get this guy and just, you know, let's say freeze it and then flatten it, you can kind of see there's kind of a delay to it. Now, if you go really close, you're going to see that we got this out of phase, which just means that these guys are not lining up. But we are still going to get that nice kind of sound that will sound wide to you. So, various ways of doing this. This is a very extreme example of one, but the easier ones would be like a clap. We can get like easily a clap. Let's say one that it's in very fucking mono. This one kind of sounds mono there. Let's lower it down. And if we apply the HAAS to this, which is one of the ways we get our claps to sound wide. Let's lower this down a bit more. We start to get it to sound wide. So the HAAS effect, all it's doing is delaying one of the sides for the other. With that being said, guys, I hope that you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope that it opens your eyes up to what being wide really means. And sounds with, as you can see, being out of phase creates wideness. Having a hard left sound, hard right changed a little bit creates wideness. EQing a signal that has stereo to it already on the sides rather than... and reducing in a mono creates wideness. And if you using synths leads, creating wideness is very easy. You just have more than one voice. Again, be very be very practical with this. Like, practice this, make some presets doing this, and get the best out of it. But with that being said, guys, I hope that you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Again, like I said, if you want to support the channel, evilsounds.com. You can find all the presets that you heard in here in those packs. And I'll see you guys next time, ninjas. You guys take care, and you guys have an amazing
He goes from shaking
day.
booty to kicking ass.